For decades, Sarah Ferguson has built a reputation as the royal who never seemed to fit the traditional mould. While other members of the British royal family were known for carefully measured speeches, polished appearances, and strict protocol, Fergie, as she's affectionately known, often appeared refreshingly different. She laughed loudly, hugged people without hesitation, cracked jokes in public, and projected an image that felt more like a favourite aunt than a royal duchess. That approachable personality, one the public rarely, if ever, saw. Even more intriguing is what some royal observers are asking now. Could these be isolated complaints from a handful of former staff members? Or are they the beginning of a much larger conversation that has remained hidden for years? Whatever the answer, one thing is certain. The Duchess of York is once again at the centre of a media storm, and judging by the growing attention surrounding these reports, this story may only be getting started. Before we unravel the latest claims and separate what's been alleged from what's actually been confirmed, take a quick moment to support the channel. If you enjoy deep dives into royal controversies, untold palace stories, and the headlines everyone is talking about, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. That way, you'll never miss our next royal investigation. Now, let's get into it. To understand why these allegations have attracted, like many senior royals, Ferguson has always occupied a unique position. She has been both an insider and an outsider, a duchess, but no longer a working royal. Divorced from Prince Andrew, yet still maintaining a remarkably close relationship with him. Frequently seen with members of the royal family, yet never quite part of its official front line. That unusual status has allowed her to reinvent herself several times over the years. Author, television personality, businesswoman, charity campaigner, public speaker. In many ways, Sarah Ferguson has spent decades rebuilding her identity beyond the palace gates. And throughout that journey, one quality has remained remarkably consistent. She has often been portrayed as warm, friendly, and easy to approach. It's an image that's become deeply embedded in public perception, which is precisely why the latest reports have surprised so many people. The renewed controversy stems largely from comments linked to royal biographer Andrew Lownie, whose book, The Rise and Fall of the House of York, explores the lives of both Sarah Ferguson and Prince Andrew. While discussing his research, Lownie claimed that several former employees described working conditions that looked very different from Ferguson's public persona. According to his account, some former staff alleged that the Duchess could be emotionally demanding and, at times, manipulative in her dealings with employees. One of the more striking claims was that certain staff members reportedly became so distressed during their employment that they would retreat to private areas simply to regain their composure before returning to work. Other accounts suggested that a handful of new employees allegedly resigned almost immediately after beginning their roles, with some reportedly deciding within a very short period that the environment simply wasn't for them. If true, those descriptions would present a side of Sarah Ferguson that contrasts sharply with the cheerful personality viewers have watched in interviews for decades. However, it's important to pause here. These are allegations attributed to former employees through Lownie's research. They have not been independently verified, and Sarah Ferguson has not accepted these characterizations of her behaviour. That distinction matters. Royal biographies often rely on interviews with individuals who have their own experiences, perspectives, and memories. Some accounts may overlap, others may contradict one another entirely. Separating first-hand experience from interpretation is rarely straightforward. Even so, once allegations like these enter the public conversation, they tend to develop a momentum of their own, and that's exactly what appears to be happening. According to reports, people close to Sarah Ferguson say she is deeply unhappy with the renewed attention surrounding these claims. Sources have suggested that she believes the current narrative presents an incomplete and, in her view, unfair picture of who she is. Those close to her reportedly argue that focusing exclusively on negative accounts ignores decades of charitable work, public service, and positive relationships she has maintained with countless colleagues and friends. But for royal commentators, another question has become increasingly important. At the moment, there is no indication that a wider wave of former staff is preparing to speak out. Still, the speculation alone has been enough to keep the story alive. After all, the royal family has seen similar situations before. A single interview becomes several. One memoir inspires another. One allegation prompts fresh questions about events from years earlier. It's a pattern royal watchers have witnessed time and time again, and that's why this latest controversy has attracted so much attention. Not simply because of what's already been said, but because of what people think could come next. The debate also highlights something much broader about public life. The version of someone we see on television is rarely the complete picture. Suddenly, the conversation becomes much bigger than the original allegation. For Sarah Ferguson, that broader conversation is already underway. And as you'll see next, the discussion doesn't stop with former staff members. Because once you examine the Duchess's long and complicated history, you quickly discover that workplace allegations are only one piece of a much larger puzzle. If the latest allegations have reignited questions about Sarah Ferguson's private life, they have also done something else. They've reopened an old conversation, one that has followed the Duchess of York for almost as long as she's been in the public eye. Money, for many members of the royal family, financial security royal. The palace wasn't writing her future, she had to write it herself. And that meant turning her name into a brand. Over the years, she embraced opportunities that many traditional royals would never consider. She wrote children's books, appeared on television, accepted speaking engagements, launched commercial partnerships, promoted wellness initiatives, worked on publishing projects, and became involved in numerous charitable causes. Some of those ventures proved successful. Others disappeared almost as quickly as they arrived. Like many entrepreneurs, Ferguson experienced both wins and disappointments. But unlike most entrepreneurs, every business decision she made unfolded beneath one of the world's brightest media spotlights. Success made headlines, failure made even bigger ones. And the York family is already navigating years of reputational challenges. Questions surrounding Prince Andrew. Debates over Royal Lodge. Speculation about the family's future role within the monarchy. Changing public attitudes toward non-working royals. Each issue feeds into the next. Each headline adds another layer, and before long, the focus: can the York family ever truly escape the weight of its past? Some believe Sarah Ferguson has spent years working tirelessly to rebuild, but even seasoned royal commentators were caught off guard, because the next chapter wouldn't involve palace staff, or financial difficulties, or Prince Andrew. Instead, it would involve music mogul Sean Diddy Combs, and allegations that Ferguson's representatives have firmly and categorically denied just when it seemed the conversation would remain focused on former staff members and old financial controversies. Another unexpected twist. This time, however, the story reached far beyond the walls of Buckingham Palace. It involved one of the biggest names in the entertainment industry, Sean Diddy Combs. At first glance, the connection seemed almost impossible to believe. What could the Duchess of York possibly have to do with an American music mogul whose career was built thousands of miles away from the British monarchy? Yet, that unlikely pairing suddenly became headline news after the updated paperback edition of royal biographer Andrew Lowney's book reportedly included a striking allegation. According to the book, a former employee connected to Combs's Bad Boy Records organisation claimed that the rapper had spoken privately about having a romantic relationship with Sarah Ferguson during the 2000s. The allegation immediately ignited a fresh wave of media attention. The timing alone guaranteed that it would. Sean Combs has recently become the focus of intense legal scrutiny and widespread public attention. As a result, nearly every new claim connected to his name attracts enormous interest, regardless of whether it can ultimately be verified. And when another globally recognized public figure is suddenly linked to that story, headlines practically write themselves. But almost as quickly as the allegation appeared, Ferguson's camp responded. According to multiple reports, people close to the Duchess categorically rejected the claim. They described it as completely false, entirely fabricated, and without any factual basis. No ambiguity, no carefully worded statement, just a firm denial. That response shifted the conversation once again. The debate was no longer simply about whether the pattern. Over the years, her public life has often unfolded in cycles. Just as one controversy begins fading from public memory, another appears to take its place. 1 month, the focus is finances. The next, it's royal family dynamics. Then comes a biography, a television interview, a resurfaced scandal, or a claim from years ago that suddenly finds new life. The result is that Ferguson rarely seems to enjoy long periods away from public scrutiny. Even when she isn't actively making headlines, someone else often is, and because of her close connection to Prince Andrew and the York family, she's frequently pulled back into the conversation. It's a position few people would envy. Because once a public image becomes tied to controversy, every new story tends to be viewed through that same lens. Supporters see resilience, critics see repetition, and somewhere between those two perspectives lies a far more complicated reality. One reason the Duchess continues to generate such strong reactions is that she has never reinvented herself more than once. She has launched businesses, written best-selling books, championed charitable causes, and remained remarkably visible despite no longer being a working royal. Many people admire that persistence. Others remain skeptical. Very few remain indifferent. Perhaps that's why she continues to fascinate royal watchers after all these years. Unlike some members of the monarchy who carefully guard every word and appearance, Sarah Ferguson has often embraced openness. She's laughed at herself. She's spoken candidly about personal struggles. She's discussed financial hardship, health challenges, and rebuilding her life after public embarrassment. That honesty has earned her sympathy from many people. But it has also meant that every fresh allegation attracts intense curiosity. People feel as though they know her. Whether they actually do is another question entirely. And perhaps that's the biggest lesson from this latest controversy. Public perception and private reality are not always the same thing. The version of someone seen on television is only one part of the story. Likewise, claims from former employees or unnamed sources represent only one perspective unless they are independently verified. That doesn't automatically make those accounts false, nor does it make them true. It simply reminds us that complicated stories deserve careful consideration. In Ferguson's case, there are now several competing narratives. One portrays a warm, resilient woman who has spent decades rebuilding her life while remaining fiercely loyal to her family despite relentless criticism. Another paints a picture of someone whose private conduct has, according to some former associates and biographical accounts, differed sharply from her public image. At this point, those narratives continue to compete for public attention, and only those directly involved know the full reality behind closed doors. Meanwhile, the House of York continues navigating one of the most challenging periods in its modern history. Prince Andrew remains largely absent from official royal duties. The family's role within the monarchy continues evolving. Public debate surrounding the future of non-working royals shows little sign of disappearing. Against that backdrop, every new headline involving Sarah Ferguson inevitably becomes part of a much larger conversation, not simply about one Duchess, but about the future reputation of an entire branch of the royal family. Will these latest allegations fade as previous controversies eventually did? Could additional former employees decide to speak publicly in the months ahead? Or will firm denials from Ferguson's representatives prove enough to slow the growing speculation? At this stage, nobody knows. And that uncertainty is exactly why the story continues attracting so much attention. History has shown that royal scandals rarely end with a single headline. They unfold over time. New information emerges, old claims resurface, books are published, interviews are given, perspectives change. What seems like the final chapter often turns out to be only the beginning of another. Whether this latest controversy becomes another brief media storm or develops into something much larger remains to be seen. For now, Sarah Ferguson once again finds herself under an intense spotlight, one that has followed her through triumphs, setbacks, reinventions, and controversies for more than 3 decades. Her supporters believe she's unfairly judged and held to a different standard than many public figures. Her critics argue that repeated controversies inevitably invite repeated questions. Wherever the truth ultimately lies, one thing is undeniable. The Duchess of York remains one of the most talked about and unpredictable figures connected to the modern British monarchy. And as long as new books, new interviews, and new allegations continue to emerge, it's unlikely that public fascination with her story will disappear anytime soon. So now, we'd like to hear from you. Do you think these reported claims from former staff deserve serious attention, or should they be viewed with caution unless independently verified? What are your thoughts on the allegations discussed in Andrew Lowney's book and the strong denials that followed? Share your perspective in the comments below. And if you enjoy balanced, in-depth coverage of royal news, palace intrigue, and the stories behind the headlines, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications. We'll continue following every major development as it unfolds. Until next time, thanks for watching, and remember, when it comes to the royal family, the most compelling stories are often the ones that raise the toughest questions.